Hi, everybody. I'm Brent Stafford, and welcome to our special coverage of the Taxpayers Protection Alliance's Good Cop 2.0, the Tobacco Harm Reduction Counter Conference to the World Health Organization's COP 11. And joining us from Geneva for day 3 of TPA's Good Cop 2.0 are Dave Williams and Martin Cullip. How's it going, gentlemen?
Good morning.
Good morning.
We're halfway there, right? Just like Bon Jovi said, halfway there, living on a prayer. So,
Well, I keep bringing up this belly of the beast issue. I mean, does it feel like you're in the middle of like global bureaucratic blah?
it does, and I'll tell you why. Just go shopping, go to a restaurant. Everything is so expensive. And it's not a coincidence that you have a global bureaucracy here that really doesn't care about spending and you have high prices. So that's one of the repercussions. But also the people that we see here, we see delegates walking around. We see, and some folks have seen delegates smoking. And what I find really fascinating is we had this photo, I guess it was from 2 days ago, from outside of the World Health Organization. From in the building, there was an ashtray filled with cigarette butts. Now, I love this. I'll tell you why I love this is because it's so hypocritical of the WHO to have an ashtray full of these cigarette butts because they give the Dirty Ashtray Award to a place like New Zealand that has actually brought down their smoking rates. And they give praise to countries like Mexico that are doing the exact opposite. So, Brent, we literally saw a dirty ashtray in front of the World Health Organization. The symbolism did not escape me at all.
So people actually saw delegates smoking.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's something you can't make up, right? I mean, you can't script that, and that's why I love these meetings because there's always going to be a lot of hypocrisy from the World Health Organization.
That's stunning, actually. Would have been nice to see somebody vaping.
Yeah, and I bet you there were people kind of behind the shadows vaping because they don't want us to see that they are vaping and are using these products for sure.
That's insane. So Martin, do tell, how did things go yesterday in day 2 of COP 11?
Um, well, the plenary carried on with statements, country statements, and NGO statements. There were 104 of them in total, and we have a panel tomorrow morning, which will be worth watching because Jeannie Cameron has watched all of these, so you don't have to, and she's going to be doing a panel on what highlights we can take from these country statements. But the thing we love St Kitts and Nevis, don't we? Their delegation was just one man. It was Denzel Douglas again, Dr. Denzel Douglas, and he made a statement similar to the one at COP10. He actually said at one point, he said ignoring harm reduction would be a disservice to public health, and he said he wanted to send a clear message to the FCTC and its governing bodies. And just like at COP10, they tried to close him down. And I don't think his speech was too long, but who knows, maybe it was. But there was also a lot of other good statements. There was Gambia, Guyana mentioned Article 1D, Albania, Guinea-Bissau, North Macedonia. Not only reference Article 1D, they also reference St Kitts and Nevis as well in support of them. So there was far more dissent in those statements yesterday than there were in the first day.
And Brent, let me read just a little bit. I don't want to bore people too much, but so Gambia said there needs to be pragmatism and it needs to be open to innovation and regulation. I mean, what a brilliant statement, right? Is to say that we have to be open for innovation. And that's what's been happening in this space for years now. And for a country to say that, and listen, Gambia is not the biggest country in this world, but if you start building upon this, St. Kitts and Nevis, Gambia, Mozambique said evidence-based regulation. What a fantastic phrase that is, because listen, we all understand that there's going to be regulation of these products. But when you talk about evidence-based regulation, as a small government sort of person, the R word is not something that I'm very welcome to, but listen, that's where we're going. As long as it's evidence-based and we can get these products on the market.
I'm always struck by their use of the term evidence-based, considering that they are the largest purveyor of misinformation around nicotine and tobacco harm reduction, probably than any other organization in the world.
Yeah, that's right. Uh, they said there is only one good cop, they said, and that's our cop. So it was great. We got mentioned in statements, and it was mentioned in the bulletin this morning as well. But the GATC tried to say it was that statement was about something else. They said it was about how progress depends on collective action. But we know what they were, they were talking about, and we disagree. We think our good cop is better than theirs. So
Well, that means that you're getting under their skin a little bit, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You mentioned the GATC. Again, we talked about them yesterday. That's the Global Alliance for Tobacco Control. And I've just got up their day 2 bulletin here. And this is them right here, Global Alliance for Tobacco Control. Somebody likes to refer to them, and I don't know if you agree, but that this is basically their propaganda bulletin they put out every day.
Yeah, it's in that document that you've got there. Every article is written either authored entirely or co-authored by a Bloomberg funding organization, without all of them, every single article. And it's quite amazing where they write things like there is no proof that vaping can help people quit smoking, for example, was mentioned in one of them articles. I mean, it is exactly what you say, it's propaganda, but that's what the bulletins are. But they do give you a reflection of what talking points are happening and over there, and their big problem that they've got at the moment is to do with the EU. You would have seen an article there saying that the EU is split, and they talked about the deafening silence on agenda item 4.1, which is forward-looking measures, because the EU couldn't come to a common position on this, so they're going to have to abstain from that part of the agenda. But that article, the top one there,
Which
it
one
seems
here?
to me to be written where they said, "Oh, a small bunch of." It said the EU Commission is doing all this wonderful work because the EU Commission wants to ban everything basically and tax everything heavily. But it said there's a small group of countries who are opposed to this, but it's not really I mean, there's about 7 countries, which is quite a rebellion when you come to the EU.
Yeah,
Yeah, those ones:
Italy,
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 Greece,
Greece.
Slovakia, Czech Republic, Romania,
Yeah,
and Bulgaria.
right.
And they put their foot down. They said no, but that article speaks in glowing terms about the progressive countries, the ones that want to ban everything: France, Germany, Spain, those countries. Talks in glowing terms about them and says the small group of countries is just getting in the way of the EU Commission's progressive policies. But they couldn't come to a common position. But that article seems to be, it's written by the Smoke Free Partnership, which is Bloomberg funded, of course. And it almost seems to be saying that the EU should ignore the countries that objected and just reach consensus on a decision on agenda item 4.1 regardless. And I think if that's what they're saying, they're pretty misunderstanding of how the EU works. Because if they did that, then that would undermine the legal basis for the treaty's application under EU law. So the EU delegation can't do that. They can't just ignore countries that said we don't want to have a position on this, because then the treaty would be irrelevant in the EU. So it's a complete waste of an article, really. But it does show that they've got a problem with the EU, because the EU is quite a influential bloc. So if all the EU countries under the EU aegis, if you like, can't vote on, that's 27 countries basically that can't come to agreement on forward-looking measures.
I found it interesting that Sweden wasn't mentioned on either side there.
Yeah, I don't know why that is. I mean, maybe they just weren't as vocal in the deliberations on the common position. But yeah, they objected to a lot of this thing, mostly because they wanted to ban nicotine pouches and raise taxes incredibly high on nicotine pouches, and they've already put their detailed opinions on that against Spain and against France. Through the TRIS notification system, so they've already made their view known. So maybe they just weren't as vocal in the debates.
Yeah, well, and we just, were reporting over the last 2 weeks that it was indeed Sweden standing up to the EU's forward-looking measures ahead of COP11 that really frustrated and stymied the EU to be able to move forward on a bunch of bans and so forth. And so here, the GATC is referring to the EU as a whole not being able to get their bleep together. But it's really the fact is that there's a bunch of countries that are saying they don't want this restrictive policies to come down in their countries. And the way the EU works, of course, is that they all have to agree. And it's the same mechanism that the WHO and FCTC operates under. Everybody has to agree. So what's going on here? This to me looks like major bullying that's going on.
Yeah, it's obviously a bit of a problem. They're trying to say, they were trying to persuade the countries there. And you saw the graphic at the top, and they're saying, no, we're not obliging you to do these forward-looking measures. We say you can consider them and you can potentially implement them. But who's going to trust these people? Who's going to trust the WHO FCTC when it seems quite clear they want it to be an obligation? They want countries to take it as an obligation that they should do these forward-looking measures. And the objections that the EU countries had in the common position, they said they don't want to see the word ban in it. They didn't want prohibition. And forward-looking measures, many of those are prohibiting items. And the WHO has made it clear that these forward-looking measures are not going to be just about combustible tobacco. They want them to apply to everything. So these countries are saying, we don't want to endorse anything. We don't want to approve a decision which involves the word ban.
Well, and let's look at the WHO. They've been heavy-handed, at least the last 2 or 3 COPs, and probably more than that, in allowing discussion. They're not allowing discussion. They're allowing discussion on their side and what they want. So when they say that they want to be all-inclusive, they want to have this discussion, we know what that means. That means they want to talk about what they want to do and the agenda that they're pushing. Listen, if they really wanted an open discussion, there would be media that would be allowed inside all of these meetings. Consumers, real consumers, not grass top consumers, the real consumers that are using these products would be represented during the SCTC during this week. So, I listen to what the WHO says, and it goes in one ear, out the other, because I just don't believe. An organization, a person has to show me by their actions, because they can say a lot, but it has to be their actions and what they actually do. And we see increasingly these meetings are being shut down more and more because we're getting more dissent. And listen, St. Kitts and Nevis, it's a small island nation, and to take this leadership, and starting last year in Panama where they were shut down and they were told to stop speaking. Now Martin tells me that the forum that they were speaking in wasn't the proper time and place. But again, if the World Health Organization liked what they had to say, I bet you they would have allowed them to speak even more and not really looked at their watch to cut them off. But again, this is a process, Brent. This is a process where now we're having more countries speak out against this. And, I think we've talked about this before, but we need a superpower, a really big country to put their foot down and say, no, we don't want to be a part of this. We need to look at tobacco harm reduction holistically and what it means. So I think that, the WHO, they're running scared a little bit here, and that's why they're shutting down discussion.
David, I've got a clip from an interview we did and released with you about 10 days ago. And I thought that it'd be perfect to play it up front because you made some comments in terms of around the WHO's resistance. So let's have a listen to this. When we come back, I'd like to get your thoughts on that topic, and then we'll keep on going. And if I get this to work, clearly did not work. Well, this is why I'm going to be able to edit this. No, for some reason this isn't working. Just one second.
It's really the evolution of what's happening at the WHO is that first it's smoking. Second, it's vaping, which is obviously a great alternative to smoking. And now nicotine is in the crosshairs of the World Health Organization. And that makes zero sense because Nicotine is not the problem. Look at the United States, Brent. We have the Food and Drug Administration back in the 70s approved nicotine replacement therapies, right? I mean, this is something that's happened in the last number of decades with nicotine gum. So they acknowledge that nicotine is not the problem. And what I find is absolutely perplexing is that doctors still believe that nicotine causes cancer. Nicotine does not cause cancer. Yet there's this a massive amount of misinformation, and the WHO is falling for this. Listen, the WHO is supposed to be a scientific group. They're supposed to be a healthcare group. They're supposed to help people. You know, they're helping people with malaria, with AIDS, and yet they don't understand the fundamentals of something as simple as nicotine and what nicotine is and what it isn't.
Is the WHO's resistance to safer nicotine products, is that dangerous?
Their resistance to these safer products it's beyond dangerous. I mean, they could make such a big difference in this world and really the landscape of healthcare and consumer choice by doing something simple and just saying that, yes, the science is there. Yes, these products are helping people. I mean, look at Sweden. You know, this is really kind of the shining example of what to do when it comes to switching from smoking. Here is a country that, you know, is 5% daily smokers. That's a smoke-free country. I mean, this is a country that, and listen, this has been part of their culture for decades, for a long time. So it's taken a long time to get here, but WHO ignores Sweden. The rest of Europe ignores what's happening in Sweden, even though, to me, this is a miracle. Sweden is a miracle, what they've done with pouches and snus, and really have gotten people to stop smoking on a large-scale basis, yet they are completely ignored.
You're always so well-spoken, Mr. Williams.
Thank you.
Well, so let me ask you about that. I mean, just where does the resistance come from?
So the resistance comes from big tobacco. Let's call it for what it is, right? Is that the World Health Organization, they do not like big tobacco, and that's why they don't want these products on the market. Let's go across the world and look at Japan with Heat Not Burn and IQOS. You have another mini miracle happening in Japan. Over the last number of years, IQOS has had a huge uptake where people are buying IQOS, using IQOS, and guess what? Heart disease is going down. I mean, how do you not call this other than a miracle? And yes, there is one company that produces IQOS. I don't care who that company is, what they are about. What I care about is that this is helping people and it's helping taxpayers. You know, something we don't talk a lot about, and that's my fault because I do run the Taxpayers Protection Alliance. I should probably talk about this more, are the taxpayer cost with healthcare. And when you have a sicker society, the healthcare costs go up, whether it's the private sector, whether it's government spending. And to bring down heart disease, to give people a healthier choice when it comes to nicotine products, that's what we need to be looking at and not be distracted by, you know, who's selling these products. And obviously, you know, the cigarette companies, big tobacco, you know, it's only been, 15, 20 years that we've seen these products come to market. I don't care. They're here. And they're helping people. And, you know, one of the panels we had yesterday, Jeffrey Zamora from Costa Rica, got some testimonials, video testimonials. They're about 1.5 2 minutes long, and how people's lives have been changed by these products. That's what I care about. I don't care who makes a profit. And quite frankly, a lot of mom and pop vape shops are making a profit off these products. Fantastic. I am so happy for them, but I'm even happier for the people that walk into their doors and buy these products and can literally breathe again after quitting combustible cigarettes.
Yeah, I totally agree. We certainly know that tobacco control has a beef with the profit motive, no doubt. Martin, I know that you've made a deal about the fact that there are so many representatives from NGOs at the COP11. And so I've got a slide here that we put together. I know you're familiar with the data, so kind of walk us through this.
Yeah, it's these NGOs, and there's so many of them. You think, why does Campaign Tobacco Free Kids need 31 delegates? But we know from what happens that they shadow different countries. They go and talk to the delegations. They have access to the delegations, so they can just go and whisper in their ear and stuff like that. The GATC, 61 delegates, and these are all funded by uh, most of them anyway. 15 of 29 of the NGOs that were accepted by WHO are funded by Bloomberg Philanthropies, which was in that Firebreak article yesterday. And so they'll just be bending people's ears and trying to get them to agree to all these strange policies that the WHO puts out.
And this last key point, I think, is pretty big to recognize, is that no organization representing people with experience of smoking or quitting smoking, i.e. consumers of safer nicotine products, are absolutely absent from the meeting.
Yeah, and you mentioned the bulletins, the propaganda things. I listed some of the authors this morning. Was Smoke Free Partnership, Bloomberg funded. ASH United States, Bloomberg funded. Global Center for Good Governance and Tobacco Control, Bloomberg funded. Corporate Accountability, Bloomberg funded. I can go on and on and on. You know, it's just the whole thing is just written by people whose pay and salary relies on Michael Bloomberg, and that apparently is apparently the trusted resource of the WHO. But if you just say maybe you should think about harm reduction or something, well, no, you're working in the interests of the tobacco industry, and they won't listen to you. It's just bizarre. It really is.
Now they don't have a very good understanding of what conflict of interest is. They think they do. They believe conflict of interest is solely in regards to whether or not there's a profit motive at the other end of financial support. However, that's completely ignoring a financial motive to individuals that work in the tobacco control industrial complex, to the organizations that work in the tobacco control industrial complex, to the regulatory bodies that are obviously, all those people are getting paid part of the tobacco control industrial complex. So, and then not to mention that they've got a moral, a crusader justification behind their conflict of interest. So how come all of that doesn't matter? And it's just this one narrow focus they have. Are they communists or something like that?
Well, Brent, let me jump in here for a second, talk about profit motive. And there is one group of people that they're cheering for these NGOs, organized crime. Organized crime is cheering on Bloomberg, because the more that these products are taken off the market, the more organized crime is going to make off of the illicit trade. So they are thrilled about what's happening in Geneva right now, because it's going to increase their profit margin. Organized crime is going to make a killing. And I use that word specifically, a killing, off of prohibition of these products.
So let's dive in then to the other kind of major issue that I've got for this block here, and that's China. Now, we don't want to beat up on China for the fact that, you know, a lot of illicit vapes, all vapes, come out of China, all vapes, legal or not, right? But, you know, the illicit market does pay in the end to where those vapes are manufactured, and that's China. China's also an authoritarian system. And what impact do they have at all on any of the regulations or the positions that the WHO might have? I put that out to you, not knowing the answer.
Well, the Chinese, Australia, they have a nationalized tobacco industry in China. And the delegations always include executives from the nationalized tobacco industry on their delegation. I mean, the WHO often writes about it and says they're annoyed about it, but they don't really do a lot to stop it. You know, but they cheer on the likes of Vietnam recently, when Vietnam banned all vaping products, and they've got a nationalized tobacco industry as well. So it's fantastic for them. They banned all the competition to the government's nationalized industry. But the WHO gave them an award for that. So they're very inconsistent.
Well, I think it's more than inconsistent, Martin, because they ram Article 5.3 down our throats, even us that have no relationship to tobacco, but but we're part of the vaping industry and we're sullied by the tobacco thing. And so, we can't be there because we are tobacco. Article 5.3, is a tool that just absolutely shuts down any kind of proper, pushback on these regulations. So China should not be allowed to be at the WHO because they are the largest tobacco company in the world. Vietnam should not be allowed to be there.
It does frustrate the WHO. They do occasionally write papers on it. But the great thing about it is that they can't do anything about it because this is the conference of the parties. The parties make the decisions. I mean, we see the FCTC Secretariat trying to gaslight the parties and trying to misinform them and guide them into, with their propaganda and their Bloomberg-funded organizations. But at the end of the day, the decisions are made by the parties. And as the decisions are made by the parties are allowed to include on their delegations whoever they like. So China chooses every time to include the nationalized tobacco industry in their delegation.
Well, I mean,
they call them different names. They change the names. They're not executive director of the tobacco industry. They give them some government name, but they're the same people.
Right. Let's have a listen. I've just got a short bite from China's opening statement that they made on day one.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Chinese government has constantly attached great importance to public health and support objectives and goals of the Convention by fulfilling its obligations in good faith, which has yielded positive outcomes. Since COP10, we have mainly carried out the following work. First, in terms of legal framework, we fully implemented the 14th five-year plan, as well as the long-range objectives through the year 2035. We also amended the law on the protection of minors, issued notice on carrying out special campaign to protect minors from the harm of e-cigarettes, and imposed stringent bans on selling tobacco products to minors. We also strictly controlled the content through television, media, and various channels. Commercial advertisements for tobacco products on radio and television are also fully prohibited. In 2024, the smoking prevalence among the population aged 15 and above in China dropped to 23.2%, a decrease of 4.9 percentage points compared with 2010. Over the past 14 years, the number of smokers in China decreased by approximately 37 million. The government of the Hong Kong SAR and the Macau SAR have been advancing tobacco control via legislation. For example, in 2025, the Hong Kong SAR passed the tobacco control legislation amendment bill prohibiting the supply of tobacco products to persons aged below 18, when also banned the possession of e-cigarettes in public places in 2026. While Macau also further amended its regime of tobacco prevention and control, expanding outdoor no-smoking areas and strengthening regulations on e-cigarettes.
So there you go.
And listen, we'll see if that's a paper tiger or not, right? I mean, it's good to say things and good, but what's the follow-through going to be with China? I think they're playing nice with the World Health Organization, and they're saying the things that people want to hear. But, we've seen this with other treaties. We've seen this with, climate change, right? They talk a good game, but the follow through is, it's not so much.
Yeah,
and it's important to note there as well that they mentioned their smoking rate. It's very high in China. It's a very high smoking rate. So one of the best things they can do, considering they make something like 93% of the vaping products in the world, is encourage more vaping. They could sell more of their products and get their people off of smoking at the same time. But as they said there, they've banned vaping in public places. I mean, so are they really looking to control tobacco and get people to quit smoking, or have they got one eye on the profits that they get from their nationalized tobacco industry?
Well, how could they not? How could they not be interested in the money that industry makes?
Yeah.
Well, gentlemen, I think that's good. At this point right now, we have to assume that, there's people listening that might not be happy with our China conversation. So we're going to jump to our interviews with some of the Good Cop attendees and then have you back and then talk a bit about what's going to be happening today at Good Cop 2.0 Day 3. So we'll catch right back to you in a couple of minutes.
Fantastic.
At the top of the organization, the secretariat, the senior management, basically Geneva, which gets most of the money, is very much a political organization, and it does the political bidding. Yes, some of the donors. Most conservatives in America are convinced that China runs the show. I don't believe that to be the case. I think, however, that the Secretariat is much happier dealing with authoritarian governments, or at least used to dealing with authoritarian governments. Tedros comes from Ethiopia, which was until, and I actually don't know today, but certainly was when I was studying it, as an authoritarian government. And it's like, you remember the language of the time. I wish we could do what China did in Wuhan, basically shutting the entire place down, literally locking people in. It's like, from a public health standpoint, it's so much easier if we didn't have to deal with, individual rights. And so I feel as though there's some of that theme that comes through a lot of this. It's like, do what we say, and it's leading to, I think, very, very dangerous outcomes. But that doesn't mean that the whole of the WHO is like that. I think that the Secretariat, the budget control, senior management is massively problematic. And one of the things that I tried to push for, and still trying, but because the US has to give 1 year notice from leaving, so it'll be in January, I think 25th, 2026, is don't leave, push for new leadership, get rid of most of these people that are running it, and set up, if you can, a subsection of this, and analyze what works. Basically and although I wouldn't necessarily trust them completely, get someone like McKinsey to come in and say, what's working here? What are you actually doing that's saving lives? Because there are things the WHO does. And it's, again, if you're just looking at tobacco harm reduction, you could see it as being 100% negative. I don't think it's 100% negative when it comes to the organization as a whole, but it's trying to get that overhaul. And I'm working with people trying to think about how a more responsive WHO would operate. We're not hopeful that anything good can come out of it, but we're at least trying.
You just mentioned the Secretariat. The Secretariat has said that the Framework Convention on Tobacco Control is a floor, not a ceiling. What does that mean, and what are the dangers behind it?
Well, the dangers behind saying that it's a floor, not a ceiling, is that, and I read the Lancet piece which came out today, and other things that are coming out from the Secretariat. They're talking about pushing higher taxation. It's like, are we not seeing taxing sin products? I'm okay with. It's like I'm okay with the gentle nudges of policy. You tax beer and wine, and you tax cigarettes, at relatively high rates because you're trying to discourage their use. But you look at what's happened in Australia and other places which have tax rates that are so high, you just encourage illegal markets and all of the really bad actors around the world. Not the tobacco companies, the really bad actors. When California banned menthol cigarettes, I think it was last year it's like, who is that benefiting? It's benefiting the Jalisco cartel, Chinese manufacturers, and traders along the Mexico-US border. As far as I know, the rate of menthol smoking in California has not really changed very much. But the people making the money are not. Sacramento's not getting the tax revenue. The legit companies aren't getting the products. What's happening is that you're emboldening some very nasty people south of the border and north of the border. And, that's the kind of outcome from where we're headed with those policies. If you increase tax rates, if you ban products which are more healthful, you are just going to drive those markets underground. And, I come from the country which has Robin Hood, robbing from the rich to pay. But it's like, this illicit markets are not good. We want things to be open and transparent, because illicit markets encourage all sorts of bad people who are trafficking in girls, in arms. That's who you're giving money to when you put these bans in place. Really bad actors across borders. And I've written books and spent time looking at the illicit pharmaceutical trade, the counterfeit pharmaceutical trade. I interviewed people in places like Nigeria and Lebanon, and it's like, when you clamp down on products or you make products unavailable, you just help the really bad actors in society. And that's such a bad outcome. And that's where they will head if they make the current policies, which are bad enough, the floor. And they head towards some ceiling, which I think would be a disaster.
And joining us today, live from Geneva, is Dr. Mark Tyndall, who's an internationally recognized for his contributions to HIV care and prevention, human rights, and drug policy reform. He was formerly the executive director of the BC Centre for Disease Control and professor of medicine at the University of British Columbia. And he's also the author of the newly released book called Vaping: Behind the Smoke and Fears. Dr. Tyndall, great to see you again.
Great to see you, Brent.
So how does it feel being in Geneva? And my phrase this week is in the belly of the beast.
Yeah, it's interesting. We're sort of protected with our little group here, the good cops. So, but we're keeping our eye on what's happening down the street. I mean, it kind of brings back memories of my days in WHO or days in HIV work, and I worked a lot with people from WHO and UNAIDS, and I came to Geneva a number of times. So, yeah, it's repeating itself all over again.
Well, that was my very next question that I had written down here on the teleprompter, was that you have experience around high-level public health types, because you were one of them. Does the FCTC's COP11, does it feel like it's got the right priorities front and center?
Well, what you were just talking about was, it occurred to me when I was listening to you talk to Martin, that this is really maybe not so much WHO, but Michael Bloomberg show. So much of the delegates there are sponsored by a billionaire, and he seems to have co-opted a lot of the discussion and has co-opted a lot of the debate. So if you fill the room full of people that are getting paid to spread a message, it's really hard to get any other counter arguments in there. So I think it's you can rail against WHO all you want, but I think the tobacco part of things has been co-opted by one guy and a whole team of NGOs that are really guiding the conversation.
Considering your background, Dr. Tyndall, why is tobacco harm reduction important?
Well, I spent my whole career involved in harm reduction that really involved quite a small proportion of the world's population. So what makes tobacco harm reduction so fascinating is just the massive implications of the health and well-being of citizens globally. So many of the lessons I learned in other fields of harm reduction are relevant to tobacco harm reduction, but just the massive number of people that are impacted, it makes it a really huge global of global importance.
Now, I know you dealt with this in your book, but just as a physician, what is the scientific, the evidence-based position on nicotine?
Well, I think you know better than I do, but I mean, clearly, we've really let the conversation get away from us, and it's no longer about science and evidence. It's about ideology and the campaign and slogans about nicotine-free world and this kind of craziness. So we've really lost hold of the science. It's, it's irrefutable that these products are much safer. It's irrefutable that nicotine is, well, addictive, does not really have a lot of health consequences. And so we've turned this into a campaign against nicotine, which is totally unjustified by what we know about nicotine.
So in your book, you spent some good deal of time on misinformation around safer nicotine products. Could you describe what that misinformation is, and to the extent of it?
Well, when I first got into this, over 10 years ago, 12 or 14 years ago, when I understood at that time that you could get people nicotine without destroying their health, I thought that it would catch on. Like, it's just such an obvious way forward. And if you had told me that in 2025 we'd be actually worse off than we were 10 or 12 years ago, I wouldn't have believed you. Still just so much misinformation. And even the millions of people who have stopped smoking cigarettes and now vape are still inundated with suggestions that what they're doing is not the right thing, that they might as well be smoking. So there's just a huge amount of misinformation out there. And I think in my medical colleagues, it's really comes down to kind of laziness and apathy. I mean, they just, a lot of my colleagues just really haven't looked into it, and really, I think, are letting their patients down and letting the health leadership down by not becoming experts in this area and really trying to focus on getting people off combustible tobacco.
Let me show you something. It's a new development, in our minds. There are a bunch of YouTube creators that are having their content pulled down, strikes being, attached to their channels and so forth, because the content, and some of it is like old content, from 5 years ago, maybe even longer, but they've been doing, interviews with people about nicotine. So with experts and stuff on studies and so forth. If you go to Google's website, and this is YouTube's medical misinformation policy. So pretty straight up what they're talking about here. And right down in it, under harmful substances and practices, content that denies the addictive or harmful properties of nicotine and tobacco, i.e. being that claims that tobacco does not cause cancer. I don't know who would ever make that, but I guess if they consider nicotine in a vape being tobacco, because the way it's so screwed up with FDA and WHO and stuff like that, they conflate the two, that, the algorithms that do all of the tracking on these issues might be striking because you're saying that nicotine doesn't cause cancer. And that's one issue. The other one is that content that claims nicotine is not addictive. Again, it's not really, nobody says that nicotine isn't addictive, but does the AI and the algorithm have the nuance to know? Then you say, well, it's addictive, but it's like only as addictive as coffee, and then start talking positively about vaping and nicotine use, you're getting your content, struck down. Just wanted to show this to you and get your thoughts on it.
Yeah, no, I think that's entirely dangerous. Yeah. I mean, as we learn more about nicotine, or at least information comes out about nicotine, I mean, you really get into the nuanced discussion of what's the difference between addiction and dependency, if nicotine can be used more recreationally, if people have to use it consistently. I mean, and I think if nicotine was just invented today, we'd be all over it, trying it out in all kinds of different therapeutic conditions, because it clearly is helpful to people. That's why people smoke. That's why people use it. So it's undeniable that nicotine serves a positive, is positive for many people who use it. And how you use it and how often you use it, it gets kind of fuzzy about how addictive it actually is. So, but I can see an algorithm like that could be highly damaging and perpetuating myths around nicotine.
Let me ask you a final question, and this is about Good Cop 2.0. What do you think so far of the event, and what kind of value does it bring?
The Good Cop?
Yes.
Yeah. No, I'm happy to be here. I mean, we're with, we're in our own little bubble. People, we don't need to convince each other of the issues here. But I do think we seem to be, the underdogs for sure. We're dealing with, back to Bloomberg and who's funding all this stuff, and we're pushing against a rock that's been backed by billions of dollars, and we don't have that. So, and we're further disadvantaged because even if we're not, receiving funding from industry, any talk about supporting alternative nicotine products, you're are on industry side. You're basically a shill for industry, no matter if you're receiving money or not, but because you're promoting a new product. So it's you really feel like the underdogs here. But it's fun being the underdog. I enjoy that, but it's definitely an uphill battle. And what's coming out of the main meeting is just so discouraging, and almost, for us in the room, it's like you just kind of laugh, like what are they talking about? It makes no sense. The awards they gave out to Mexico and New Zealand are totally upside down. So they're rewarding companies who are countries that are promoting cigarettes, and discouraging countries that are reducing cigarettes. So it's really totally upside down. And looking back, it's like almost a comedy, or it should be an SNL sketch or something.
Well, let's pray that that happens at some point. Dr. Tyndall, thanks so much for joining us today.
Okay, nice seeing you, Brent. Bye-bye.
A.G. Miller, the WHO's Framework Convention on Tobacco Control is meeting this week in Geneva for COP11. Many of the tobacco harm reduction community say the WHO has turned its back on innovation. From your vantage point, has the WHO helped or hurt global progress on tobacco harm reduction?
Well, WHO has been far too close to the prohibitionist position, and it sounds like they're going to swallow the whole thing, perhaps coming up. We don't know for sure about that, but it sounds like they might, and that's public health malpractice. If people follow what they're saying, more people will quit e-cigarettes. More people will go back to combustibles and to their death. But Abby Friedman at Yale has the great study on taxing heavily or restricting e-cigarettes. More people end up smoking. That's going to be the consequence of what they're proposing, and it's a very terrible consequence. Public health malpractice, as I say.
Wow. The WHO continues to resist endorsing e-cigarettes nicotine pouches as safer alternatives, even as the data grows stronger. Why do you think the organization remains so resistant? Why are they practicing public health malpractice?
I don't know. It's really hard to explain, and I don't know a lot about them. I haven't had the experience that some people have had with them, but it's just wrong. It's impossible to explain because the science is so good and so strong on tobacco harm reduction, and what they're saying is just does not make sense. And for some reason, very responsible people in great positions are oblivious sometimes to these issues and these developments that, Sweden went with snus a long time ago, and snus was banned in the rest of Europe. And then Sweden has this, much lower lung cancer death rate than the rest of Europe. And instead of learning from something like that, they continue to deny it. So there's an element of being wrong and an element of being stubborn. It's not a good combination, Brent.
And also joining us today, live from Geneva at Good Cop 2.0, is Gabriel Oke. Gabriel is a medical laboratory scientist and communications professional with expertise in tobacco harm reduction, research, and advocacy across low and middle income countries. Gabriel, thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I think it's tough to be the last guest. They've said a lot already, so yeah. But
well, you've got a perspective to add for us here. You've been at Good Cop 2.0 now for a couple of days. What do you make of the event?
Thank you very much. So it's been amazing, to be honest. Like joining some of the sessions, you listen to people from different countries, regions, and then you kind of compare that to what is happening in Africa. So it's quite amazing because now you're not just reading on papers, you're not just reading publications, you're really meeting people who have published the studies. You can interact with them, you can ask questions, and it's been fun, to be honest, for me.
Now, you're from Africa. Why is tobacco harm reduction important to you and the people in your region?
Thank you very much. I mean, it's obvious, like we have like a huge proportion of people who smoke in Africa, right? So like we have more than 70% of the whole burden across the world, in LMIC. So, and Africa is like a huge part of that. So it's really important that we are part of the discussion, right? We are part of the decision making, and just lauding WHO regulations and guidelines on countries will not really help, because the realities in different countries, quite different. Some countries are huge, on planting tobacco and exporting tobacco. That's where they generate a huge some of their taxation from. Some countries don't do, are not like that. So realities are different, and then just having a set of regulations, articles, okay, do this, very tough, right? So I think for Africa, we really need to be at the forefront more and make decisions more, learn from countries that are really doing well from outside Africa and more. because it's really, really tough to implement some of these, almost all of the articles of the of the FCTC, to be fair.
Do you feel that there's like undue pressure that comes from the WHO on low and middle income countries that maybe they don't apply to more Western developed nations?
Yeah, because I mean, to be fair to WHO, they've really done a lot for healthcare in Africa, to be fair, like strengthening health systems, supporting ministries of health. So we can't deny that. So there's been a lot of trust that have been built over the years. So to now, fight WHO on some of these, on the FCTC will be like, okay, I mean, you're fighting your your trusted ally over the years. So it's a difficult position to be in. And I think another real important thing also is that even currently there are lots of programs in Africa, ministries of health and all that are currently supported by funding from WHO and partners of WHO. So it means a lot to have a voice. I think I'll put it that way, in Africa, because now you are thinking of, if we say this for FCTC, how do we now keep WHO on some of these other things that they are supporting us on, so it's really tough.
Do you think, I mean, I don't know how to ask this without it being loaded, but does the WHO play a role in frustrating THR efforts in Africa?
Well, maybe not fully directly, okay, because but indirectly to a large extent, to be honest, because now people in government, ministries of health have to now find ways around it. Let me give an example. Like, for example, now when some of the industries want to go into countries, they are looking at, you have to talk to countries and ministries of health agencies and the likes. And then because most of these agencies and ministries of health have trusted WHO on on various other things. So now they now have huge problem with how to label, like, the nicotine pouches that come into the country, because you want to regulate them, right? And even one of the articles, stated that you have to, like, keep industry at bay. You have to know what industry is doing in your country, right? So, and then they don't have to navigate that. Like, what should be on the pouches, for example, how should the ads, be made on the pouches, like the labelings and all that. So it's indirectly, I'll say yes, to be fair. Yeah, indirectly, yeah.
Well, you're pretty fair to the WHO.
I mean, coming from Africa, again, you don't want to deny that they've done some work, but it's just that in this aspect, they've not really done. I mean, they are doing a lot of injustice. And I think for me, the realization of all these things came about during COVID, when you see the way COVID was handled, right? So, for me, that was like a major point in my career as well, to be like, okay, it seems you have to, like, make analysis yourself, like you have to read studies yourself, talk to people in different fields yourself. And a major thing that really got me is the fact that both sides don't meet. Like, you rarely see meetings where WHO and people who don't support THR and people who support THR meet. So as a young person coming out of uni during that period, I was like, okay, it seems there's something here. And for me, I just read and followed the evidence.
Well, that's awesome. So, well, Gabriel, thank you so much for your perspective on this, and good luck at the rest of the conference.
Thank you. Yeah.
Love the promo, gentlemen.
Yeah, it's really nice. Thank you.
So we're about to start day 3 there in Geneva. So quickly fill us in on what you got teed up.
Yeah, so I'll talk a little bit about the panels, and maybe Martin can get some insight on what's going to happen up the road. So today is Asia Day. And what that means is a lot of the discussion, all of the discussion is going to be focused on the different countries in Asia and how they're approaching THR. And I think we're going to hear a lot of different stories because obviously Asia is a bunch of different countries and a lot of different approaches to what's happening with THR. Nancy Lucas, who is just an absolute rock star, who is in New Zealand, will be leading a lot of the discussions. Dr. Rohan Sakara, he will be talking about India, and he's a cardiologist, right, Martin?
Yeah.
Yeah, and this I love this, Brent, is to have a cardiologist on a panel talking about THR and what it means for people. So again, I'm excited for the panels today, but I'm always excited for the panels.
Martin?
Yeah, we got another chance to see Professor Tiki. He's going to be there, and Clarice from Philippines, who I met when I went over to Philippines that time. She's a great character as well. So, and we've also got Cyrus Salim Sartoni, who's from a Pakistani family, and she's going to talk about what's happening in Pakistan. So I'm looking forward to a lot of it. Yeah, it's a strange beast. You know, talking to Nancy, I talk to her quite a lot. And she says everything's different in Asia Pacific, and she's right. They do things differently there, and so it'd be interesting to hear what's going on in those countries. Because as Professor Tiki said when I spoke to him on Monday, they have strange political arrangements. You know, one minute they might be making these products more available. The next time they want to ban them, so you never know where they are at any particular time. And the advocates have to face those troubles along the way. And of course, in India, Dr. Rohan, they've got a ban on vaping products and stuff like that. So it'd be interesting to hear how they face up to those problems.
Well, I agree. And, you know, several of those people are going to be live on our show tomorrow when we do our edition for Asia Day. So thanks very much, gentlemen. I'll let you go so you can get on with it. And that is our everything for today for our special edition of RegWatch Live. Before you head off, please hit subscribe down below on YouTube, like us on Facebook, and don't forget to follow us on X. For RegulatorWatch.com, I'm Brent Stafford.